From simplyvet.com, this is SimplyScale, a series aiming at helping 6, 7, and 8-figure sellers scale their businesses using insights from experts and entrepreneurs. My name is Alex Wyatt, and this episode features Sean Broderick from eDesk's, and we're going to be focusing on customer experience for e-commerce and what sellers and brands alike need to prepare and get right in 2022. Hi, Sean. Welcome to SimplyScale.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Alex.
Yeah, it's so great to have you on board. So can you give me a bit of a background about you and your journey into the e-commerce industry?
My journey in e-commerce, Alex, has been a relatively short one. I'm kind of a telco baby. I've spent about 10 years in B2C and B2B roles across telecoms, a couple of great companies in Ireland here, Air and Virgin Media. But then I guess as COVID hit, I kind of saw the way the world was going and the growth trajectory that we saw in the e-commerce market, and had a great opportunity to join eDesk's here in April. And that's been my first foray into e-commerce, and it's just it's so exciting to learn about it.
Yeah. So with that being said, you've had a little bit of experience in e-commerce. So what do you think the trends are going to be coming into e-commerce in 2022? And why should sellers be getting on board with these trends?
I just think, and it's obviously a biased view, right? Because from an eDesk's perspective, we're all about multi-channel, but multi-channel is the biggest trend that we are seeing in our existing customer base and in the prospects we talk to. Marketplace GMV in the past year has grown by about 81% year on year. And I think that's a huge trend in the marketplace. For our sellers, Amazon is their main channel. Most of those would sell in about 6 different Amazon marketplaces. But increasingly, they're starting to look at other marketplaces like Walmart. eBay has obviously been consistent there, but I think there's other places as well, like Wish, but also in specific geographies as well. The marketplaces that sellers and merchants are actually looking to sell into, those specific geographies don't necessarily overlap with the Amazon customer base. So for example, if you had Cdiscount in France or Kaufland in Germany, these places are all really specific to the market you're in. I know from our particular perspective, we have customers who have launched on the Walmart marketplace this year. And when you launch into the Walmart marketplace, you immediately grow your addressable base of customers by 30 million. And that's very, very difficult to achieve, that type of scale and addressable market in one specific channel and in one specific marketplace. So I do think there's a huge opportunity there in 2022 for merchants to dip their toe into specific marketplaces and see which one works and which product lines work in different specific marketplaces as well.
Perfect. So yeah, it's all about not putting all your eggs in one basket, but also broadening your ability for customer acquisition as well. So I couldn't
agree more.
Yeah, I think that it could be a really big trend going into 2022. And so with sellers and brands on multiple channels, you're automatically starting to think, how are you going to manage all of these channels? And on top of that, all of the customer care and engagement going, involved in that as well. You just mentioned you have access to 30 million more customers just by opening one other channel. So you can automatically think, okay, how am I going to manage this customer experience and their queries that they might have. So you'll have customers interacting with your brand, not only through your sales channels, but also social channels. So what are the most common ways customers want to contact brands?
I think it's always that classic marketing answer, isn't it, Alex? It depends. But from a general point of view, Future Commerce ran a study this year about 750 US online shoppers, and 27% their preference was online chat with an agent. So that speed of interaction that you can have on chat on the website is really, really important. 27% also said voice. So very, very strong preference for voice. And as you would expect, a little bit higher preference there for people in the older age cohorts. They're going to want to be able to pick up the phone and be able to speak to somebody when they have an issue, because I think in general these days customers are super savvy, right? So they know that they're going to look through the FAQs on the site. They typically will exhaust other avenues before they actually pick up the phone and call you. Email is obviously a steady one from a customer support perspective, e-commerce customer support perspective. About 20% of respondents to that survey said email was their preferred channel. And then some of the more interesting ones, I think 12% was an online chatbot. I think the experience with those automated chatbots can be patchy, and I think they're okay for very, very basic queries, but I don't think the user experience and the smarts that sit inside of those chatbots have really advanced enough for people to be comfortable to have that type of a conversation with the bot. And I think one of the two fastest growing areas that we've seen this year has been SMS communication with customers, and also social media. And so you referenced it there around brands and customers engaging with e-commerce sellers on social. And for things like they're putting questions into comments on posts, they're sending DMs on Instagram and on Facebook and on Twitter. Brands need to be able to react to those and take those questions and queries in the same buckets as to which they look at their broader email, their voice, their chat. So I think those are kind of the main 6 areas in which customers like to get in touch. I think there's also a kind of you have to look at that age cohort as well, as to, if you're selling baseball caps to people in their 20s, that capability or that I suppose motivation to have a voice service and a voice activated service is maybe not there. But if you have a slightly older age cohort, they're going to want to have that assurance that a voice and a number is there that you can actually pick up the phone. One of the kind of interesting things about all of these different channels when it comes to communications are that people's tolerances as to how long they're actually willing to wait to speak to somebody differ for all of those different channels, right? So if you're on a chat, for example, on a website, or a partner of ours, Aircall, they ran a study in 2021, and typically a customer is happy to wait for about 2 minutes. On a chat, they'll wait about 6 minutes for an SMS response. On a phone call, they'll wait about 12 minutes, and on email, 24-hour response times is fine. So brands need to be kind of aware of, if they dive into the text and SMS responses or offering chat support, for example, they need to know what customers' expectations are for each of those channels and how fast a customer is going to want to get a response in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's quite a quick turnaround. So you really have to make sure that you know what you're doing when you're going into adding all these different channels to communicate with your brand. So if you're not engaging with your customer base correctly, how could that impact your brand in general, or your company in general?
I think you can't have a relationship without interactions. So you can't automate the customer journey all the way through, because a customer is never going to fall in love with a brand that they're not going to have any interaction with. That's just not really how it works. And I think those type of proactive communications that you have with your customers are so important, especially when it comes to expectation setting around those times that we just outlined there for the different channels themselves. So if someone puts in a query, if you're able to tell them straight away that you're going to be waiting 15 minutes for a response on chat, you're going to be 20 minutes waiting for a response on SMS or via email, we'll get back to you in 24 hours. I think when that expectation is set with customers, well, then it's at that point that they get a little bit of comfort level as to that they're in the queue, they know they're going to be looked after. And then at that point for the brand, it's just all about doing what you say you're going to do. So if you tell them something, if you give them an update on when you're going to send them an update on where their order is, where any shipping issues or delays or any product issues that you're having, if you're upfront with your customer base, you set the expectations at the outset and you're super clear on when you're going to get back to them and when those problems are going to get solved. I think those are the pieces that are going to help you engage with your customer base correctly.
So I think those are really good thoughts there. And I guess this really kind of ties into reviews and customers leaving reviews. So can you give us a bit of a psychology behind positive and negative reviews based on customer experiences, and maybe even how businesses can use those reviews to help their business going forward and updating their business?
Yeah, it's an area that we've put a lot of focus on ourselves in 2021, boosting our scores on Trustpilot and G2 from, I guess, just a general eDesk perspective. But we also ran some research on consumers' views and how often they are likely to leave reviews, what motivates them to do it, and what motivates a person to actually leave either a positive or a negative review. And we spoke to 2,000 customers, 1,000 in the US, 1,000 in the UK back in May of this year. And only about 34% of customers will actually give you a positive review on a marketplace, on Trustpilot, on somewhere like that after one good experience. Another 34% will do it after multiple good experiences. So the barrier that gets set from a review perspective is actually quite high. You do need to have multiple stacked, really good experiences from a product perspective, which can be hard for an e-commerce brand, right? Because if you take Black Friday, Cyber Monday, those type of interactions that you're having with brands that have large offers, they can be typically one and done type transactions. Whereas if you have, I guess, a brand that you're interacting with, you're purchasing maybe once a month or a couple of times a year, it's more and more difficult to kind of get those folks on. And I think a lot of customers, when you look at what motivates them or what they're going to do when they have a bad experience, about 11% of customers will leave a negative review after multiple bad experience, and about 10% will leave a negative review after one bad experience. So it's a kind of a 1 in 10 shot. If you have someone who is have an issue with the product, an issue with shipping, an issue with delays, or customer some sort of an issue with the product line itself, they're going to leave you a bad review straight away. So, and I think when you look at all of those things in the round, those reviews that you see on the site, most of us are pretty fickle. Most of us are going to look at those reviews. If it's not over 4.5, 4.6, typically we're not going to look at the product line. And as we know, the Amazon algorithm, particularly from that largest marketplace point of view, that all feeds into who wins the buy box. It all feeds into who gets prominence on the site. So the higher the more reviews that you have, and the better quality they are, the more likely you are to kind of win and just be top of mind from an Amazon marketplace perspective as well.
Yeah, I think that's so real. Like, even just thinking personally, if I were to go and have a positive experience, I'm not necessarily the first one to go and rave about it, for example, right away. It would maybe take a few positive experiences. But if it's a negative experience and I've had a bad day, well, maybe I get online and start looking at it, putting a negative review, depending on the experience, of course. So I can completely relate to that, to those statistics. I am a statistic then.
Yeah, but I think, Alex, when you look at, things like people who have that type of negative experience and people who want to go online and talk about it, you'd be surprised at the reasons why people actually go and do that. And I think two of the things that kind of jumped out from our study back in May was about 30% of folks went on and left a negative review because the service agent and the customer service provider had a really bad attitude. And that politeness comes up again and again and again across our customer base. To provide a really good experience, you need to actually provide your agents with the tools to actually solve customers' queries quickly, but also in a polite and fair manner. I think that jumps out at us absolutely all the time. The thing that kind of annoys people as well is when they take too long to respond. That's a similar type of, about 30% of folks will have a negative experience with your customer care if you're taking too long to respond. And those are way above even if people who when have an issue with a refund, when a refund is disputed. So I think there's a lot of areas there that lead to that kind of negative experience, that lead to those negative reviews that you see on the site. And brands, in order for them to avoid those type of areas, they need to be polite, they need to be fast, and they need to give refunds when and where they're required.
Is there a particular point in which a brand should be asking for reviews? Is it after they engage with a customer representative, for example, from a brand, or what is the perfect time to be reaching out to a customer asking for a review, whether it's on the service or the brand or the product?
I think speed is key here, and I think the automated way in which you can actually get in front of your customer base immediately after purchase is really, really important. I think what some brands get wrong here is they'll set their automated communications a little bit too fast after purchase. So you'll see brands falling into the trap of looking for Trustpilot reviews before the product has even been delivered and before it's even been shipped. And if you take a product line has a little bit more of a long tail, it might take a while for the customer to unbox something like that. They need to be able to feel like they've received the product, they've used it. So I think typically our customer base finds that when you send those automated requests for Google My Business, Amazon, request a review, reviews on Trustpilot, 5 to 6 days post the product actually getting delivered to the customer is the right place to start, because I think it can almost kick off a kind of a chain reaction whereby if you send that immediate request for review, it's going to engender that type of the customer's going to look for a ticket. They're going to be, why am I being asked for a review already? I haven't even received the product. You're putting the customer on the back foot straight away. So I think that kind of 5 or 6 day timeline, requesting those reviews in an automated way, that's going to drive up the number of positive reviews that you get from your customers and also the overall number of them as well.
Perfect. So what does the future of customer service, communication, and customer experience online look like for e-commerce businesses?
For us, it's all about multi-channel. So I think the days of slapping an email address on your merchant's website or on your merchant's page and saying, we'll get back to you within 48 to 72 hours, I think those days are over. And I think most brands know it as well. It can be easier to manage. And I think where brands are actually going to step into 2022 with real motivation, real vigor, is when they're offering a broader set of communication channels to their customers. So like some of the ones I outlined earlier, SMS, email, chatbot, voice, all of those different pieces that you're offering to your customer base, online chat on your website, online chat on the marketplace. When you're offering all of those particular elements up to your customers, you're giving them better choice, you're giving them more ways to actually interact with you on a day-to-day basis. And also for different cohorts of customers as well. I spoke about that earlier on around different preferences that different age groups are going to have. A younger cohort of customers, anyone from that kind of 15 to 30 range, is going to be more interested in sending an Instagram DM to a brand they follow because that's where they've purchased the product or that's where they saw an influencer using it. That's not going to be the case for someone who's a little bit older, wants to pick up the phone and check where their order is. So I think that type of multi-layered and that multi-channel approach to customer communication is going to be a huge trend for next year. And I think brands have kind of shied away from looking at all of those things together because it feels really complex and it feels like an area that's going to be very difficult for them to implement. But I do think that the kind of tool sets are there now for brands to really push on and provide a much broader set of channels in 2022 and beyond.
I think, yeah, SMS is really interesting as well. I got a text from a brand just the other day that I purchased off of, and they were checking in and making sure I had a good experience or that my product was, what I wanted. And, I texted right back, and yeah, within that 6-minute time frame that you mentioned earlier, they got back to me, and I just love that experience. So I think that is definitely a cool way to interact with, your customers going forward.
And I think to that point, some of the brands, I think, particularly in the Shopify space for D2C, you're seeing a lot of brands like Klaviyo, brands like Octane AI are just generating phenomenal mindshare, not just in their own customer bases, but with the brands that they work with and the engagement that they're seeing. You think when you send an email campaign out, I'm obviously working in marketing, so we have a good sense of what these open rates look like. But the open rates and the engagement rates that brands are seeing with SMS and how they actually converse with their customers phenomenally out. The performance is way outstripping traditional email and traditional display and push advertising and Google messaging.
Wow, that's really exciting to hear. So how can brands use automation and AI to make their lives easier and keep their customers more informed? We're kind of going into a really digital age with Facebook metaverse and Web 3.0 and so on. So how can brands use that to their advantage in their communication to their customers?
I think this is all about getting the tool set correct. I think a lot of brands will have that mindset and skill set up. They've built their business, they're building their brands kind of from an SMB into an enterprise e-commerce. But what they need to be able to make sure is that the tech stack that they choose all the way through, from an e-commerce perspective, from the marketplaces they're on, their web stores they're using, how that links into the provisioning, the logistics, the shipping, the customer care, the voice. The automation that you're going to be able to see is really only coming from all of those things working together. Mm-hmm. So the only way that you can actually provide an automated update to your shipping from a customer communication perspective is by having your communication tools, your customer care tools linked with your shipping. Where is it in the supply chain? Is it linked directly into your logistics provider? How linked up are you with your marketplaces? I think having that kind of baseline is really, really important for brands to be able to provide those automated responses that customers want. So is it 48 hours away? Is it 24 hours away? In an hour's time, it's going to actually get delivered by our delivery provider. Having all of those things and having a single view is really, really important. And I think when a customer has an issue then, and when they get in front of an agent, whether that's through any of the channels we talked about earlier, voice, SMS, email, chat, that the agent in that case has all of the information needed to actually go and solve that problem. So that type of automation, I think, and proactive communication you're going to get from your customer base, it really needs to be all tied together in order to take advantage of the automation and AI capabilities that all of these tool sets have all the way through the tech stack.
Okay, so this is called SimplyScale after all. So when you think about, or when you think of scaling a business and scaling customer service, it could be quite daunting. Sometimes it's more putting more bums on seats, trying to look after all the new customers that you've acquired. So how does a business scale their customer service alongside scaling their top line sales without breaking the bank?
I think that's a really, really interesting question. And for us, it's not necessarily about putting bums on seats and throwing seats and additional bodies at the problem, because it can be expensive. But what I think a business needs to think about is, how optimized are my agents currently? The people that I've got in seat from a customer support perspective, how optimized are they? Are they logging into multiple systems? Are they in 2FA hell by trying to log into different email accounts, different marketplace, Amazon Seller Central, eBay? I think there's a mass of productivity gains that can be achieved that will be able to reduce communication SLAs by 40% or more without adding a single agent. And I think that's where smart SMBs can kind of get a really strong competitive advantage by putting the building blocks in place. Are you automating how you actually respond to the tickets? Are you able to group the most important ones together, the most urgent ones together? I think all of those elements, when you put them actually in place as the business grows, that's really where the opportunity is. And I think a lot of brands, as they scale up, the customer support part is what they actually don't put the focus on. And I think that we're obviously biased from an eDesk's perspective, but I think in this case, the bias is really warranted, right? Because it's because we have the customer, we put the customer at the center of everything we do, and we want our brands to do the same thing. So having those building blocks in place, being able to automate a lot of these responses, being able to filter them all together, taking all of those manual tasks and those manual farming out of tickets to various different agents in the team, those are the things that brands need to get right before they scale up, not after.
I think that's really, really useful for a lot of any size business really to take on board, and I think that's kind of where eDesk really can come and help businesses as well with manage your customer service across multiple platforms and multiple in multiple languages and so on, and in multiple ways. So that's really, really interesting. Okay, so can you summarize 5 key takeaways for businesses to get their customer service right going into 2022? What do people need to start thinking about right now to make sure in 2022 their customer service is 5 stars across the board?
Yeah, the 5 ones for me are: the first is multi-channel marketplace, diversify where you're actually selling to your customers. The second we talked about in depth today, which is multi-channel customer support. How are you engaging with your customers? Are you giving them the options that they need? The third is that interaction piece. You can't have a relationship without interactions. The fourth is community. And I think that's going to be such a huge trend for next year, providing a place in which your own customers can interact with each other. Whether that's via your own knowledge base, via a specific community, via the following that you're engendering on Twitter or on Facebook or on Instagram. All of these places are huge. And I think one of the things we're seeing a lot as well is this consolidation of e-commerce brands, and people like Thrasio, Elevate Brands, Razor Group in Germany, looking at consolidating a lot of brands into one particular area, using tools and systems to speed up and make more efficient these disparate DTC brands that are being pulled together. So I think those are the kind of 5 key areas: multi-channel marketplaces, multi-channel customer support, relationships, interactions, community, and consolidation. Those are the big ones for me, Alex.
Wow, thank you so much for all of this insight. This has been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today, Sean. And yeah, so thank you so much for coming on to SimplyScale. What is the best way for sellers to get in touch and find out more about eDesk?
So check us out on www.edesk.com, and we'd love to have you follow us on LinkedIn, on Twitter. You can find us at eDesk on LinkedIn. My name is Sean Broderick. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. It'd be great to connect there.
Perfect. And I'll make sure I put all of the links in the show notes so that everyone has access to them. And yeah, thank you so much, Sean, for joining us.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of SimplyScale. If you haven't checked out our other episodes we have available, be sure to check them out on YouTube now. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Thank you.